Hey y'all, and welcome to my channel. So I've had this picture pinned on one of my Pinterest boards forever and just happened to come across it the other day when I was looking for something else. I have a white button-down shirt in my stash and thought, hey, let's give this one a try. And while we're doing it, let's do a little tutorial on bias tape. Okay, let's start by talking about bias tape. Now, normally you can buy bias tape where you find your sewing supplies, places like Joann, Hobby Lobby, even Walmart in the sewing department. Normally it will come in packages like this, and it will tell you what kind it is, how many yards is in there, and then how wide it is. Now, there's three kinds of bias tape that are probably the most common. One is single fold bias tape. Now this is basically, as it says, you have one fold where your strip of bias tape, the raw edges are folded in. That's called single fold bias tape, okay? Then you have double fold bias tape. So double fold bias tape is single fold bias tape that has been folded in half. That's considered the second fold. Okay, so if you're using or you have a project that maybe requires double fold bias tape, you can't find it in the right color, don't have it, you can use single fold bias tape and simply fold it in half and press, and that will give you the same as double fold. The other one is extra wide double fold. This one is folded just like the regular double fold. The raw edges are folded in, and then it's folded in half, but it's twice the size. Now, you can find this also online. You can find it in colors and patterns and things like that. You can also make your own. Basically, it is a strip. Most of these bias tapes are actually a cotton poly blend. They're not 100% cotton. So you could buy some broadcloth, cut a strip as wide as you want, but on the bias, which is diagonal to the grain. That gives it a slight stretch. You can see even the packaged ones, there are seams where they've sewn the strips together. After that, it's just a matter of folding and pressing to the size that you want. You can also buy little attachments or little metal or plastic pieces called bias tape makers that can help you with that process. Now, to sew them on, there's a couple different ways you can do it, and I've tried it here. Now, the one thing to realize, and I know some people don't realize this, is when you look at bias tape, one of the sides is actually a hair wider than the other side. It's not folded exactly in half. The side that's a little bit wider goes on the back side. The side that's narrower goes on the front. The reason for that is when you go to sew it on, you can catch both sides. Now, probably the most common way to sew on bias tape is to simply take it, sandwich the fabric in between the bias tape, and you sew it down with a straight stitch like I've done here. Obviously, you would sew it down usually with a color that corresponds with the tape color of the tape. I've done a different color just so you can see it. By sewing it like this with a straight stitch close to the edge, because the wider part's on the back, you're sure to catch that in, which is what I've done here. I've just sandwiched it in and straight stitched it down. Some people do a zigzag or something, but if you do it where the widest part's to the back and then stitch it down, it works. Another way you can do it is to open it up. Again, you want the wider part on the back. You're going to open it up, right sides together, and you're going to sew in that fold line all the way down what you need. And then you would fold it back over and then you can either top stitch it, and to do this you would top stitch it right down just like this one is done here, or you can do what's called a stitch in the ditch, which you would stitch right on that line where the fabric meets the bias tape, and you would do that in your fabric color. And by doing that, again, you're catching the back because the back is wider than the front, but you also don't see any stitching on the bias tape. Another way you can do that is doing it the opposite way, putting it right side to wrong side, stitching it in the crease, and then folding it over. Now to do this, you could either top stitch it or hand stitch it in place. Same as with this one, you could also just hand stitch it. Again, you would still want your widest part to be in the back, the narrower part to be in the front, but then you could slip stitch it in place and your stitching is not visible. A lot of times when it comes to quilting and things like that, this is the way the binding is done, where you don't see the stitching. It's hand stitched in place at the end. A lot of times you will see this as well. For the shirt that I'm going to do, I am just going to do it with this method here, just sandwiching the fabric in between the two and then using a matching color of thread to sew down. I hope this helps a little bit. So now let's get started with the upcycle. All right, so I've got my white button down. You can use whatever color you want, black, denim, doesn't matter. And I got it, this one, for whatever reason I bought, is a petite 2XL, which I wear a medium, so it's too big. But I want it big. I want that kind of boxy, loose fit shirt. One of the things I did do was I unpicked the cuff and took out the pleats, ran a gathering stitch, and then reattached it. I want it to have more of a gathering look to it than a pleated look. So I've already done that. I did also try it on and marked where I wanted the top of my kind of curly Q curved line to start. Now this one does not have a pocket, but I am going to use part of this shirt down here that I cut off. I'm going to use that to make a little pocket for the top. I also got some black buttons. I am just going to snip these off, of course save the buttons because I can use them again for something else. I just measured across my button, went and just bought some black buttons. You want to make sure that they fit through the buttonhole, which these do. And then once it's done, I will sew that on. Changing out the buttons is one of the easiest ways that you can kind of upcycle a shirt. Also on this shirt, it has pointed collars. Now I am going to go ahead and cut mine into a round shape. Because I'm using bias tape, it's going to enclose the raw edges. I will go ahead and cut this off and then use this as a pattern to mark the other one so that they look the same. At the bottom here, I just took my water erasable pen and started, and I kind of drew a squiggly line here out. I'm going to leave the back of the shirt and not cut anything off. I will cover up the hem with bias tape, but I'm not going to cut it off. And then this part here, I just started lower. So I've decided I'm going to use red for this side. I'm going to use pink for the pocket. I'm going to use this teal color for the collar, and then I'm going to use a yellow for this, but the only yellow I could find was the single fold. So as I showed you earlier, I will be folding this in half and pressing it to make the double fold. Now before I cut anything, I will try it on, make sure I like the way everything looks, and then I will go ahead and cut out, and I'm also going to cut out the pocket. All right, so I've gone ahead, I have cut off and rounded the corners of my collar here. I have cut off the bottom and just kind of made it match up. I need to trim this a little bit more of a curve here. Just kind of made it match up with the hem on this side and then on this side. And then I took some of that fabric I cut off. I'm actually going to use the hem as the top of the pocket and then just kind of cut it into a curve shape to put on my pocket. Now for this, the pocket, there's two ways you can do it. You can either bind the whole edge of your pocket and then sew it on the shirt and sew it on again, or if your shirt already has a pocket, you can simply take your bias tape and instead of like sandwiching it together, just lay it on top like this and then sew it around the edge. Now when it comes to the raw edges at the end, you basically can just unfold it, fold over the raw edge, give it a good press, and then refold it back in place. And you've got a nice clean edge. And you're going to want to do that where you start and stop on your shirt. Normally, if you put the bias tape on before you sewed your shirt together, the ends would be tucked inside the seam allowances. But because the shirt's already made, you would want to turn under that raw edge. And then you would simply slip it on, in between the two if that's how you're doing it. Now you can pin this on as you're sewing it, which is totally all right. Take your time when you're sewing it. The reason you want to use the bias tape is because it's going to help you go around the curves. It will stretch and maneuver and allow you to go around the curves nice and neatly versus using like a ribbon or something like that that's not going to ease around that curve. Okay, so now I'm just going to go and start sewing all my bias tapes on using a matching color of thread. All right, so I've got everything sewn on. The collar up here is done. I've done the pocket here, and then the edge. I went ahead and just did the red all the way around, and then at the side seam switched it over to the yellow. Now a good tip, especially when doing curves, is to give it a good press, especially if you have a little bit of steam on your iron. That really helps it mold to the curve well. So now I just need to change out the buttons for the black ones. And then also in the inspiration photo, the cuffs were black. So I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do anything there. Now I could just do, a bias tape around the edge if I wanted to, just to give it that black look. Or I could just cut a piece of fabric that's black and basically just top stitch it to the top of the cuff. I haven't decided what I'm going to do. I may just leave it as it is and just change out the buttons to black. But again, I like the way this turns out. I think it'd look really cute, maybe in a black button down with some bright colored bias tape, and then maybe some cute little rhinestone buttons would be really cute. You could definitely use the extra wide bias tape double fold instead of just the regular double fold if you want a little bit more of a pop of color. So again, that's really up to you. So I'm just going to get the buttons changed, play around with the cuffs, and then we'll see how it turns out. I've already worn this a few times. Love the way it turned out, and I hope this inspires y'all to upcycle a button down that you might have and give bias tape a try. And happy sewing!